Hello gentlemen, I am Vitold and I know that many of you have been waiting for this particular video with a comparison of Africa Twin and the V-Strom 1050. Some of you are hardcore Africa Twin fans, most of us respect its name for good reasons, but many wonder if in this version, after years, it's worth all that hype around it. On the other side, there is a good and trusted Suzuki V-Strom 1050 that now looks like a good old Suzuki DR Big. The engine of a V-Strom is mostly the same since 2002, so now you will get my take on which bike should suit you better depending on where and how you ride. Also, what you value in a motorcycle and which one simply does what better. Because there usually is a clear winner in every single category. What you should also know up front is that I rode all big adventure motorcycles that are currently on the market, and this includes an Africa Twin 1100 Adventure Sports with DCT and with 2 letters of ES in its name, so electronic suspension, and also Suzuki V-Strom 1050 XT, which is mostly now a regular V-Strom 1050 from 2023. I also do not own a V-Strom nor the Africa Twin, so I've got no interest in presenting you anything other than my real experiences and feelings about these two bikes. So let's get to it. In the end, I will explain which one I would buy myself, putting my money on the table, and starting off with the engine and performance as the first category. In one corner, there is a V-Strom with 1037 cubic centimeters of displacement, 107 horsepower and 100 newton-meters of torque, while in the other corner, there is an Africa Twin with 1084 cubic centimeters of engine displacement, 102 horsepower and 105 newton-meters of torque. What also matters is that Africa Twin 1100 Adventure Sports version with a larger fuel tank, electronically adjustable Showa suspension and DCT gearbox, dual clutch transmission, it adds weight to the bike. On the other hand, this is the top spec motorcycle that seems to be the most common choice among the riders. I also believe that it's the most interesting combination if you want to have an Africa, and if I was buying myself an Africa today, that would be my specification as well. So the performance of these bikes is actually feeling pretty similar, with one exception. They do feel similar also because both produce an amazing sound, which creates a feeling of them being more powerful than they actually are, and also are more quick. These things do matter and we actually cannot skip them, even though they're not directly connected. The actual acceleration times may be similar, while the exception is when DCT is in that Honda. On one hand, if you're just cruising in a default D mode, it can be pretty laggy with reducing gears, and then you yourself on a V-Strom working the gears would be able to perhaps react quicker. But then if you're keeping Africa in one of the more sporty S modes, then there is no beating how quickly and effortlessly the bike changes the gears, even quickly a few in a row. V-Strom 1050 can have a quick shifter from 2023, so that it may close the gap here, but the sheer ease of Africa's gear changes make it an exceptional experience. I actually feel that V-Strom is quicker and more flexible when in the specific gear and specific speed, but I really feel that Africa deserves a win here thanks to moving things into another dimension. And while the technology is amazing, the way of operation can be a bit confusing, so please also I recommend that you check my full review of the Africa that is linked in the description to make sure that you can live with some of the drawbacks or some of the sacrifices that I'm presenting there fully in that honest review. One of them I actually need to mention here as well, as the bike can get hot on the right side of the engine and you may feel it after stopping at traffic lights. V-Strom 1050 is quick enough and delivers a lot of fun when accelerating, so it's not necessarily worse exactly, but I think that Honda is just superior thanks to that DCT with its overall powertrain, and I think it should win. However, V-Strom has got no heating issues, maybe a bit more vibration when it's too low RPMs, it gets a little bit clunky, but yeah, we've got Honda winning this one. Now, moving to the next category, which is handling. Well, here there is a confusion about Africa. At low speeds, so like when you're riding between the cars, filtering traffic in the city, it doesn't want to let you ride perfectly straight and is far from being precise when steering. Then, when it comes to turning and leaning left and right at higher speeds, where actual leans start to happen and appear, it is a beast and it does absolutely great. V-Strom is also not very precise at low speed, but it feels better, likely because of being less top heavy. It's not as big of a struggle with it as it is on Africa to ride slowly and to point it where you want it. Then at higher speeds, it's still fine in a V-Strom and you can get a lot out of this bike, but it's not as easy to switch directions as it is on an Africa. You can do the same, you can achieve the same, but it requires a little bit more effort, you need a little bit more force to do it. The V-Strom is precise and it goes how and where you want it to go. It's just not as good and is not as enjoyable then as Africa. So the win for high-speed maneuvers goes definitely to Africa. And for low-speed riding, it goes to a V-Strom. However, I really didn't find it pleasant at all to ride Africa in the city traffic, where I could actually survive on a V-Strom, as it felt overall easier to live with. Now, this is a sort of a situation where in the end it may go both ways, depending on where you ride and how much. And I think I would prefer a situation where the bike does everything okay, fine, but not necessarily the best, it doesn't exceed anywhere, rather than have it be superior in one set of circumstances, but then make me avoid or struggle at the others. So following the logic, the V-Strom should be taking a win here, and it does. So in other words, Africa is much worse in the city, and it's just slightly better outside. Now about the suspension and especially comfort. My Africa Twin 1100 was equipped with electronically adjustable suspension, while V-Strom only has it adjustable manually. Africa also has superior ground clearance at 25 centimeters versus 16.5 centimeters of V-Strom 1050's ground clearance, and also suspension travel in Africa is 23 centimeters in the front, while in a V-Strom it's just 16, and in the rear Africa gives you 22 centimeters, while V-Strom still is at 16. So in terms of riding over super rough terrain, Africa will be able to go further, and also at higher speeds and with more margin. Africa also has an edge in terms of ease of adjustment, obviously, which you can do on the fly with a flick of a switch that happens electronically. However, there are also versions of Africa, the base ones, without it. So if you want to see more which ones got what and how and why and how much it costs between the models, I'm comparing both the V-Stroms to each other over the recent years and model changes, and also Africa's in separate videos, the differences between the versions and trims. Anyway, objectively looking at these three factors, so suspension technology, ground clearance, and suspension travel, Africa easily would win. I'm saying would. But you know, I'm not going to leave it like that. As a side of that, there's also a matter of how it actually feels to ride. And here, ladies and gentlemen, in terms of comfort, V-Strom absolutely demolishes Africa regardless of the settings. Africa is nicely settled when riding on a perfectly flat surface. It feels stable, it feels solid, it feels under control. And then once you get onto some bumps, into a rougher parts of the terrain, some uneven parts of just tarmac, it becomes just nervous and shaky, where the V-Strom just keeps going in a composed way, letting you focus on riding instead of keeping yourself in the seat. In both bikes, the front suspension dives like hell, which is taking away a lot of precision in steering and braking. But other than that, I cannot see Africa taking this one from V-Strom unless you're focused on off-roading and you don't care about comfort. But then likely you might get away with Africa's standard suspension, and so the fact of it being the only bike in this comparison with such an ease of adjustment, since it can be electronic, it would just disappear. So Africa is more capable of the road, but V-Strom is just so much more pleasant to ride, which matters when riding it every day, and so it takes a win here. Still, it is not as comfy as my office chair, well, and it's got electric adjustment as well, by the way, so like Africa Twin with a flick of God knows how many switches, but many switches, since it adjusts in every almost possible way. If you like the concept, check powerseats.eu and you may order these chairs right there. I also have a beige one, sometimes swap them when I can. And following the topic to seat and position comfort, none of them can match this, but there are two things to consider here. One is caused by Honda being tall and top heavy, or rather top heavier than most other bikes. Now, in terms of position, Africa can, because of that, be overwhelming, which obviously isn't giving you the most relaxing and the most comfortable feeling when dealing with it. Suzuki feels more compact and it feels more light. And the data on the seat height from 2023, even the base V-Strom 1050 has it adjustable without the need of buying an accessory. It starts from 85.5 centimeters and can be raised to 87.5, while Africa actually can have it a tiny bit lower at 85 centimeters, but also can have it raised by 2 centimeters, this time to 87 centimeters. I've kept the seats in their lowest positions to comfortably reach the ground with my 183 centimeters tall or 6 feet tall. I found it okay working for me. Foot pegs in both bikes are located where I would expect them, and the knee angle is fine for me in both bikes as well. Now, both have very hard seats. In Suzuki it's too hard, while in Honda it's way too hard, to the point that I think that it may just as well be the most uncomfortable seat in the whole category. Only KTM 1290 Super Adventure S can somehow compete with it. So this automatically makes the V-Strom win. The next category is wind protection, and let's again say that it's about Africa Twin 1100 Adventure Sports with an adjustable windshield here. The base Africa Twin doesn't have windshield adjustment. Now both V-Strom 1050 and Africa Twin 1100 Adventure Sports have okay windshields that fall into the category standard and do not generate much turbulences. Africa may be here even a bit better thanks to its super tall front end, which protects your chest from the wind really well. Now both have pretty bad height adjustment systems. In Suzuki you've got to stop the bike, get off of it, walk in the front of the bike, unlock a lever that Suzuki installed there for the safety of kids to prevent them from adjusting their windshield while riding. I know, that's extremely helpful. You get back on the bike only to find out that after adjusting it's still not exactly where you wanted it in the first place, and you need to look for the next petrol station on a highway 80 kilometers further, only to repeat the procedure once again. Now imagine riding with friends. Who's going to be the most hated rider? Honda is a bit, let me put it this way, less bad here. They have installed an adjustment system that you actually can use while being on the bike, but you need to use both hands at the same time. With Suzuki there's no hope, while with Honda you may use your opportunity at the, let's say, traffic lights, for example. So since other areas are similar, Honda wins here because of the adjustment system. An important part of riding is how a motorcycle brakes. Not brakes down, doesn't brake itself, but in terms of brakes or gently slows down in the case of these two. None of them is a masterpiece here, but Suzuki does it fine. The brakes aren't amazing or not as good as the best, but from 2023 are also linked, so using the front brake, the rear one may also get activated. Honda's front brake, on the other hand, is too weak and it requires a lot of force to do the job, and you won't be able to use it with one finger. The rear brake in a Honda is okay, but the issue with the front one makes it not okay overall, and so the V-Strom, I believe, is significantly better here, unless anyone prefers a weak front brake. Then Africa Twin would be a better choice. In the category of drivetrain, both bikes are the same as they both use chain drive, so it's a tie. Fuel tank of a V-Strom is 20 liters regardless of a version. In the base Africa Twin it's 18.8 liters, and in Adventure Sports it's 24.8 liters. The more options, the better, and so Honda wins here. Especially that, again, Adventure Sports seems to be the most popular choice. Let's also remember that the categories may not be equally important to all of us, so I'm not going to count the wins and tell you that one bike is better than the other based on that. Getting to the weight, we may count them as very, very similar, same almost, but Honda just feels so much heavier despite not actually being necessarily heavier. This is also because of it being taller and with a lot of weight, feeling like it's located much higher than in a V-Strom. And to me, V-Strom feels much lighter in comparison, and I do appreciate that. So it's a win for this bike. Hard data doesn't always tell you how things are, as there can be other factors affecting how it really feels. V-Strom is 242 kilograms, Africa Twin spec'd as this is 250, the lightest you can get it with no equipment, the lowest version, non-Adventure Sport, no DCT, nothing, is 229 kilograms, so it's technically lighter, it could be lighter. But anyway, V-Strom wins. In the category of tech, V-Strom scores nowhere near Africa Twin. because Africa Twin has everything that a V-Strom can have, except maybe for linked brakes that Honda doesn't mention. Maybe like they are there, they just don't mention it. But Africa has, first of all, cornering front light in the Adventure Sports version. It's got a touchscreen that's actually the most annoying display, the most annoying system ever. So V-Strom kills it actually here, despite being a simpler system till recently also being monochrome with no colors. A bit of a shame, but now 2023, it's now colorful, it's all fine. Honda not only forces you to wait ages for the display to load after switching the bike on, but then it forces you to every time go and accept a huge warning message, which is idiotic in its nature, as it forces you to take action likely long after you have already set off, which is the opposite of safety, because you need to go there with it. Go there with your finger, or just accept it looking for a button, because it's 1,000 buttons there. Do they expect us to read that message every single time? This is really bad. But then there comes DCT. Then there comes electronically adjustable suspension, and again, 7 billion buttons. But who wouldn't want all that? But seriously, a touchscreen is a gimmick that I myself couldn't find a good way of using, even a reason to use. It's only some parts of it, and only sometimes can be operated this way. A number of buttons and their layout doesn't help, definitely, but in the end of the day, Africa is, well, we gotta say that it's a more advanced motorcycle than V-Strom. It's got also more tech, and you've got more options with it, and so Honda wins here. Now an exciting category, and the sound. And these two are both super cool, in fact, here. V-Strom produces the most beautiful note, the most beautiful sound, thanks to its two-cylinder V-shaped engine that is sounding deep and as if it had a supercharger installed. I love it, and if you install some of the nicer aftermarket exhausts, it's an absolute #1, I think. However, that's only after you modify it, so it's an additional effort. Nobody is forced to do it, not everyone's going to do it. It's only fair if we talk about how they are when they're stock. And here Africa Twin sounds so nicely loud and so aggressive that the contest is super close. Its two-cylinder inline engine sound makes a larger impression than the V-Strom, exactly because of being louder and sounding a lot like a one-cylinder four-stroke engine. At the same time, DCT switching gears up at higher revs generates an insane sound spectacle. That, to me, reminds me of a V8 63 series engine of Mercedes-Benz cars, which are my absolute favorite out of all engine sounds. Both bikes are special here for good reasons, so I think you guys should be the ones to tell which you prefer. And I'll say that I'm leaning towards Honda here. Yeah. Since it's stock, let's just give it a win. V-Strom just needs an aftermarket exhaust. Another very subjective point is design, and I'm going to keep it short here. I'm not a fan of the Suzuki DR big design on Suzuki V-Strom, while I think that Africa Twin 1100 maintains pretty neutral proportions. It doesn't look controversial, but instead it's easy on the eye and still pretty cool looking with those, especially with those cool front ring LED lights. Well, I would say it's definitely a win for Honda here from me, but also if you think otherwise, let me know in the comments which one you think looks more badass. Both bikes look and feel solid as well, that's fine. The price and the value for money comparison may be important here, and comparing both bikes as stock in their base variants, they are priced almost identical, at least on my market, with less than 1% of a difference in price. There is not much you can add to a V-Strom, while if you want your Africa to be as I would, for example, want it to be if I was in a market for Africa Twin specifically, so with that electronically adjustable suspension, with DCT, and in the Adventure Sports variant with adjustable windshield and so on, then we're talking about Africa being 36% more expensive. We may debate if DCT can be worth that, or is it worth that, and it can be worth any kind of money, as no other bike in the category can even have it, so I feel it's fair to charge as much as the market can take. But what I pay, I would if this would be what I wanted to have in my bike. But some of us not necessarily do want or do need that. And I think that also, since Africa Twin has a more legendary name than V-Strom still, even combined with DR Big, there are more possible configuration options, and overall it may be more appealing to riders. Comparing base prices could be, I think, a good starting point. So V-Strom may still offer better value, considering its handling also and its comfort, and also not forcing you to pay much more to get what you want. So price-wise, let's say that they would tie here. Now value-wise, a V-Strom I think would be a winner for me. Having a 36% difference, if I would not need a DCT, an electronic suspension, that's just too much money. Now the last point of this comparison is the X factor, and here the image of an Africa Twin does the job, along with a spicy DCT doing its job also really well. Both bikes sound super cool and they provide okay, fine enough performance. Africa will excite you as well when you try to use indicators, or when you try to use the horn, or to use the transmission downshift button if you've got the DCTs. They are all in the same spot, mixed all around in the places where you least expect them, because especially the horn is in a place where indicator switch usually is. Nice one, Honda, I've got to give you that. Same with the display. Now V-Strom is generating way less emotion either way. It doesn't excite in a fantastic, great way, unless you install an aftermarket exhaust. That's a killer. And it also doesn't annoy you as much. So certainly the X factor goes to Africa Twin, and that's, well, let's consider it a win. DCT, come on, love it or hate it, but if you love it, it's going to be a full love in a form of my mom is the best no matter what. The conclusion: V-Strom wins in handling, suspension comfort, seat and position comfort, brakes, in weight and price, and value for money. Honda takes the win in engine and performance, wind protection, fuel tank capacity, tech, sound, design, and X factor. They tied in the drivetrain category. And if I had to choose one today, I would consider DCT being a super cool thing, taking into account that Africa Twin can offer more when riding off the road, especially in hardcore places where I personally actually wouldn't take any motorcycle from this big, heavy and expensive category of wardrobes on wheels. It can be satisfying to conquer new terrains, but until you fall, I suppose. Of course, we've all got different perspectives, but mine would be focusing more on on-road use, and considering that V-Strom is more comfortable and it handles better at slow speeds while giving you similar performance as Africa Twin while not feeling overwhelming, I think I would be coming to the garage more often if there was a V-Strom just to ride it and either relax or have fun with it. I cannot stand the current design again, so I would have to modify it somehow just to be able to live with it though, and this is my perspective at these two, and I hope it's useful to you guys. And if you want to fully investigate each of these bikes individually, go ahead on a journey with me and watch my full honest reviews of both the V-Strom and Africa Twin that I have linked in the description. Have a good time and see you there.